The sky was dark and heavy with clouds, like it was carrying a secret it couldn't keep for long. In the small mountain town of Silver Hollow, winter had come early and hard that year. The snow started falling in November and didn't stop. By December, the roads were nearly impossible to drive on, and the wind blew so strong it felt like it could knock you off your feet. Elena Hartley stood by the window of her small rented cabin, watching the snow fall in thick, angry lines. She pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders even though she knew it wouldn't help much. The heat hadn't worked for 2 days now. The pipes had frozen, and every time she turned on the faucet, all she got was silence. She looked at her 2 children playing quietly on the floor, her 5-year-old daughter Lily coloring with a broken crayon, and her 3-year-old son Max stacking blocks into a shaky tower. They didn't know how bad things were getting. Elena wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. Elena was a single mom. Her husband Daniel had passed away 2 years ago in a car accident. Since then, it had been just the 3 of them. She worked part-time at the local diner and cleaned houses when she could find work. Life wasn't easy, but they made do. She always believed that as long as her kids were safe and happy, everything else would work out. But now, things weren't working out. The storm had knocked out the power, and the food in the fridge was starting to go bad. There was only enough dry food to last another day or 2. The phone lines were down and the nearest town was miles away. Her old car was buried under snow in the driveway. She tried digging it out yesterday, but after an hour of shivering and slipping, she gave up. Still, she couldn't just sit and wait for someone to rescue them. If the weather kept going like this, no one would be able to reach them for days. So she made a decision. She packed what little food they had left, a few cans, some bread, and a bottle of water. She wrapped Lily and Max in thick coats, hats, gloves, and scarves. She zipped them into their snowsuits and made sure they wore 2 pairs of socks each. Then she bundled them both into the double stroller and pushed open the front door. The cold hit her like a slap to the face. Snow was everywhere. It came up to her knees in some places. The wind screamed through the trees like it was angry. Each step felt heavier than the last. But she kept moving. She remembered seeing a farmhouse on the edge of town before the snow covered everything. It was far, maybe 5 miles, but it was their best chance. The farmer who lived there, Mr. Bellamy, was kind. He'd helped her once before when her car got stuck in the mud during spring. If anyone would have heat, food, and a phone, it would be him. Lily sat quietly in the stroller, holding her stuffed bunny tightly. Max kept trying to stand up, his little hands pushing against the bars. "Stay seated, sweetie," Elena said gently, brushing snow from his forehead. He smiled up at her, his cheeks red from the cold. They walked for what felt like hours. The wind grew stronger. The snow fell harder. The path she thought she knew disappeared under the white blanket. Her legs burned from walking through the deep snow. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves. At one point, the stroller got stuck in a snowdrift. Elena tried pulling it free, but it wouldn't budge. So she picked up Max in one arm and carried Lily by the hand. The baby cried softly from the cold, but Elena whispered soothing words and kissed his forehead. "I've got you," she whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." But deep down, fear crept into her heart. What if she was wrong about the direction? What if Mr. Bellamy wasn't home? What if they never found help? She shook those thoughts away. She couldn't afford to lose hope. Not now. They stopped near a big pine tree to rest. Elena crouched down, shielding the kids as best she could. She checked their faces. They were pale, their lips slightly blue. She rubbed their hands between hers, trying to warm them up. "We're almost there," she told them, even though she wasn't sure if that was true. Max sneezed. Lily sniffled. Elena's own body was starting to feel strange. Her arms and legs felt heavy. Her head hurt. She realized she was getting too cold. Hypothermia was setting in. She had read about it before. How people start to feel sleepy when their body gets too cold. How they forget where they are. "No," she whispered to herself. "Not yet. Not like this." She forced herself back to her feet. She lifted Max into her arms and took Lily's hand again. They had to keep moving. But soon her legs began to give out. Her breath came in short, shallow puffs. Her vision blurred. Just ahead, she saw something. Was it a house? A light? Or was it just her mind playing tricks? She stumbled forward one more time, her strength almost gone. Her knees buckled. She sank into the snow. With the last of her energy, she pulled Lily and Max close to her chest. She wrapped her arms around them and held them tight. "I love you," she whispered. "Mommy loves you both so much." And then, the world around her went quiet. That night, the snow kept falling. In the forest, the wind howled like a lonely animal. Under the pine tree, a mother lay curled around her children, unmoving. Above them, the stars blinked coldly in the black sky. No one knew they were there, but somewhere not far away, a man named Thomas Green lit a fire in his cabin. He sipped coffee and stared out the window, thinking about the storm. Tomorrow, he planned, to check his traps. Tomorrow he would see something he would never forget. But tonight the world slept beneath the snow. The snow kept falling all through the night. The wind howled like a wild animal outside Thomas Green's cabin. Inside it was warm and quiet. A fire crackled in the fireplace. Thomas sat at his wooden table, sipping hot coffee and reading an old book. He had lived alone for years now, ever since his wife passed away. Life had gotten quieter after that, too quiet sometimes. But he had learned to live with it. Thomas was a logger by trade. He worked deep in the forest during the day, cutting wood and setting traps. At night he came home to his small but cozy cabin. He didn't have much company, except for the deer and foxes that sometimes came near his door. But tonight, something felt different. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was just the storm, or maybe it was the silence. Something told him not to go to sleep yet. So he sat up a little longer than usual. He looked out the window. Outside, everything was white and still. Trees stood like frozen giants in the dark. Snow covered the ground thickly like a blanket hiding secrets beneath it. Thomas turned off the light and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, he thought, I'll go check my traps. And with that, he fell asleep. Meanwhile, under the pine tree, Elena lay curled around her two children. Snow had started to cover them like a soft, cold blanket. Her arms were still wrapped tightly around Lily and Max. Her face was pale. Her lips were blue. She hadn't moved in hours. The cold had taken most of her strength. She had done everything she could to protect her kids, but now, time was running out. Lily was still breathing very slowly. Max was too. But both were slipping deeper into the icy grip of hypothermia. Their small bodies couldn't fight the cold forever. Back in his cabin, Thomas woke up early the next morning. The storm had stopped. The sun was shining weakly through the clouds. The world looked peaceful and untouched. He made himself breakfast, some eggs, bread, and more coffee. Then he got dressed warmly. He wore thick gloves, a heavy coat, and snow boots. He stepped outside and took a deep breath. The air was fresh and cold. He walked to his snowmobile, loaded it with tools, food, and extra blankets, and headed into the forest. As he drove slowly through the trees, he checked his traps one by one. Most were empty. One had caught a rabbit. He gently released it. He only trapped what he needed. He kept going deeper into the woods. Then, as he passed by a big pine tree, he saw something strange, a flash of red. He stopped the snowmobile, blinked, looked again. There, half buried in the snow, was a woman. She was holding two small children tightly. At first, Thomas thought they were dead. His heart dropped. "No," he whispered. He jumped off the snowmobile and ran toward them. The snow was deep, and every step was hard. But he didn't care. He reached them quickly. He knelt down beside Elena. She wasn't moving. Her skin was icy to the touch. He checked her pulse. Weak. Very weak. He looked at the children. Same thing. They were alive, but barely. "Come on," he said out loud. more to himself than anyone else. "You're not dying here." Thomas knew time was the enemy now. Every second counted. He remembered his training from when he used to volunteer as a firefighter. He knew what to do, but he had to act fast. He pulled out the extra blankets from his snowmobile. Carefully, gently, he lifted each child and wrapped them in layers of warmth. He did the same for Elena. Then he placed them all onto the back of the snowmobile, making sure they were secure and protected from the wind. He climbed on and turned the engine on. The snowmobile roared to life. Thomas drove as fast as he dared, careful not to jolt them too much. Every few minutes he checked their breathing. Still there, still weak, but still there. It took nearly an hour to get back to his cabin. When he arrived, he carried them inside one by one. He laid them on the floor near the fireplace. He built a bigger fire. He boiled water and wrapped hot towels in cloth to place against their skin. He rubbed their arms and legs gently to bring blood flow back. For hours he worked non-stop. He gave them sips of warm water. He covered them in blankets. He stayed by their side, watching them carefully. Finally, after what felt like forever, Lily opened her eyes. Thomas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. She looked around, confused, scared. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe." Lily blinked and closed her eyes again, falling back into sleep. Soon after, Max stirred too. His tiny hand moved slightly. Thomas smiled. One by one, they were coming back. Elena was the last to wake up. Hours later, she groaned softly and opened her eyes. She looked at Thomas. Her vision was blurry at first. Where am I?" she asked weakly. "You're safe," Thomas said. "You're in my cabin. You were stuck in the snow." Elena tried to sit up but winced in pain. "Lily? Max?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. "They're right here," Thomas said gently, pointing to the two sleeping children nearby. Tears filled Elena's eyes. She tried to speak, but no words came, just tears. Thomas handed her a warm cup of tea. "Drink this," he said. "You need to rest." Elena took the cup with shaking hands. She looked at Thomas. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas nodded. "You're welcome," he said. "You're lucky I came by when I did." Elena looked at her children again. She couldn't believe they were still alive. She remembered walking through the snow. She remembered falling. She remembered holding them tight, and then nothing. She looked at Thomas again. "How did you find us?" "I saw a flash of red," he said. "Your coat. It stood out against the snow." Elena smiled weakly. That red coat had saved them. Thomas looked at her seriously. "You were close," he said. "Too close." Elena nodded. "I know," she said quietly. There was a long silence. Then Thomas got up and added more wood to the fire. "We'll take care of you," he said. "All of you." Elena watched him move around the cabin. She realized something. This man, the stranger who lived alone in the woods, had given them a second chance. Without him, they wouldn't be here. She looked at her children again. They were alive. Thanks to Thomas. And now the real journey would begin. Recovery, hope, and gratitude beyond words. Thomas Green had lived alone for years, but never had he felt so responsible for other lives as he did now. Inside his small cabin, near the roaring fireplace, lay 3 people clinging to life. Elena Hartley was still weak, barely able to sit up without pain. Her children, Lily and Max, were asleep under thick blankets, their faces pale, their breathing shallow. Thomas knew this wasn't over. He had saved them from the snow, but saving them from the cold inside their bodies was another fight. He remembered what he had learned during his time as a volunteer firefighter. Hypothermia was dangerous, especially for children. Their bodies lost heat faster than adults. If not treated properly, even if they survived the first night, they could still get worse. So Thomas stayed by their side all through the night. He kept the fire burning. He checked on them every few minutes. He made sure they stayed warm. Around midnight, Elena stirred again. She looked around slowly, her eyes heavy with sleep and fear. "Where am I?" she whispered. "You're safe," Thomas said softly, sitting beside her. "You're still in my cabin." Elena tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. She looked at him confused. "My kids? They're right here," Thomas said, pointing to the two small figures wrapped in blankets nearby. Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I thought we were gone," she said quietly. Thomas gave her a gentle smile. "You almost were," he said honestly, "but not quite." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them again. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you." Thomas shook his head. "You don't have to," he said. "Just rest. You've got a long way to go." By morning, Thomas called emergency services using his satellite phone, his only way of reaching the outside world when the regular lines went down. It took nearly 4 hours for the rescue team to arrive. A snowmobile ambulance came through the forest, led by paramedics used to dealing with winter emergencies. They entered the cabin carefully, bringing with them medical equipment and more warmth. The team checked each of them one by one. Lily was awake but tired. Max was still sleeping. Helena could barely speak. The paramedics praised Thomas for his quick thinking. "You did everything right," one of them said. "If you hadn't warmed them slowly and kept them dry, they might not have made it." Thomas just nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt relieved. The paramedics loaded Elena and the kids onto stretchers and carried them carefully to the ambulance. Before they left, Elena turned to Thomas. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Thomas looked at her. "I hope so," he said. And then, the ambulance disappeared into the snowy forest. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. They placed Elena and her children in warming beds. They monitored their heartbeats and gave them fluids through IVs. For the next 24 hours, they watched closely. Elena was told that all 3 of them had suffered from severe hypothermia. The cold had slowed their hearts and made their breathing weak. If Thomas hadn't found them when he did, they wouldn't have survived. The doctors also warned her that there could be long-term effects, like frostbite or organ damage, but after tests, they found no serious harm. It was a miracle. 2 days. Later, Elena finally woke up fully. She sat up slowly, blinking against the bright lights of the hospital room. Her arms ached, her legs felt stiff, but she was alive. She looked to her left. There, in a small bed, was Lily, still sleeping. To her right, Max was curled up in another bed, sucking his thumb. Elena smiled through her tears. She reached out and touched Lily's hand. Warm, alive. She looked around the room. A nurse walked in. "Oh good, you're awake," she said with a kind smile. "How are they?" Elena asked. "They're doing great," the nurse replied. "They'll need some time to recover, but they're going to be just fine." Elena let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Can I hold them?" she asked. The nurse smiled. "In a little while," she said. "Let your body rest first." Elena nodded. She looked out the window. Outside, the snow was still falling, but the sky was brighter now, like the storm had passed, and something new had begun. Over the next week, Elena and her children stayed in the hospital. Visitors came. Often, neighbors brought toys and cards for Lily and Max. The local news heard about their story and wanted to interview Elena. She agreed, but only if Thomas could be included. "He's the reason we're alive," she said. When the reporter asked her how she felt, Elena answered with tears in her eyes. "I thought I was saying goodbye to them," she said. "I thought I was giving them one last hug before we all went to sleep forever. But then, someone saw us. Someone helped us. And now we're here." The story spread fast. Newspapers printed headlines. "Miracle in the snow. Stranger saves family from certain death. Mother's final embrace turns into second chance." People across the country read about it. Some sent letters, others donated money to help the family. Thomas, however, stayed quiet. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to know they were okay. One day, Elena called him from the hospital. Thomas picked up the phone with shaky hands. "Hello?" "Hi," Elena said softly. "It's me, Elena." Thomas smiled. "I'm glad to hear your voice," he said. "We're coming home soon," she said. "I wanted to ask, can we visit you? When we're better, I mean." Thomas paused. He hadn't had guests in years, but something about these people, their strength, their love, had changed something in him. "Yes," he said, "I'd like that." Weeks passed. Spring began to come. The snow started to melt. Birds returned to the trees. Life moved forward. Elena and her children finally returned home. They were still recovering, but stronger now. And one sunny afternoon, they knocked on Thomas's door. He opened it, surprised. Lily ran forward and hugged his leg. Max waved shyly. Elena smiled. "We're here," she said. Thomas stepped aside. "Come in," he said. And for the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel empty. It felt full of life, full of hope, full of gratitude. This was just the beginning. The real healing would take time, but for now, they were together, and that was enough. After that first visit, something changed. Not just for Elena and her kids, but for Thomas too. Before he met them, Thomas Green had lived a quiet life. He was used to being alone. After his wife passed away, he didn't feel like talking much or making new friends. The forest became his home and silence became his companion. But now things were different. Elena and her children had brought warmth back into his life, not just from their presence, but from the love they carried with them. Even after surviving the cold snow and the danger of hypothermia, the healing wasn't over. Emotionally, they all still had wounds to mend. Elena had nightmares. She would wake up at night thinking she was still outside in the snow, holding her children tight as the cold took over. She would sit up in bed sweating and shaking, only to remind herself they were safe. Lily, who was 5 years old, started acting differently too. She wouldn't let go of her mother's hand. She cried more often. She asked questions like, "Will we be stuck in the snow again? Will someone come save us if it happens again?" Max, the youngest, was too small to understand everything, but he felt the change too. He began waking up crying in the middle of the night. Elena tried to stay strong for them, but sometimes, late at night, she cried quietly into her pillow. She kept thanking God they were alive, but she also kept wondering how close they had come to losing everything. And then there was Thomas. He didn't say much when they visited him, but he listened. He watched Lily play with Max. He watched Elena try to smile even when she was tired. He saw the pain behind her eyes, and he understood, because he knew what it was like to lose someone. He had lost his wife to cancer years ago. Watching her fade away had broken something inside him. He had stopped going out much. He had stopped talking to people. He had built walls around himself. But now those walls were cracking. One afternoon, while sitting by the fire, Thomas looked at Elena and said softly, "I know you're trying to be strong." Elena looked at him surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked. "For your kids," he said. "You don't want to show them you're scared. You want to make sure they feel safe." Elena nodded slowly. "That's right," she said. "I have to be okay for them." Thomas smiled gently. "You can be okay," he said, "but you don't have to pretend you're not hurting." Elena blinked back tears. "No one has said that to me before," she whispered. Thomas looked at the fire. "I've been where you are," he said. "After my wife died, I thought I had to be strong too. But the truth is, strength isn't pretending everything's fine. Strength is asking for help when you need it." Elena stared at him, then she smiled. This time a real one. "Thank you," she said. From that day on, their visits became more regular. At first, it was just once a week. They would bring food, stories, and laughter. Soon it became part of their routine. Sometimes Thomas would cook dinner for them. Other times they'd just sit together and talk. Lily started calling Thomas Uncle Tom. It made him smile every time. Max, who was shy, at first started warming up to him too. One day he ran up and hugged Thomas's leg without being told. Thomas picked him up and held him high. Max laughed for the first time in weeks. That sound filled the cabin with light. As the months went by, something amazing happened. The fear in Elena's heart started to fade. She slept through the night again. She stopped checking the weather constantly. She even started driving again, slowly regaining her confidence. Lily returned to school and made new friends. Max began sleeping through the night and smiling more. They were healing, and so was Thomas. He started joining Elena and the kids for meals at their house. He helped fix the fence in their backyard. He taught Lily how to ride a bike. He showed Max how to build little wooden toys. Neighbors noticed the change in Thomas, too. He used to keep to himself, one neighbor said. Now he smiles more. Another added, "He's like part of the family now." And maybe he was. One evening, as summer came to Silver Hollow, Elena sat beside Thomas on the porch. The sun was setting. Birds sang. The air smelled like pine and fresh grass. "It's funny," Elena said. "We almost died that day." Thomas looked at her. "But you didn't," he said simply. Elena smiled. "I used to think about death a lot after it happened," she admitted. "I kept imagining what would have happened if you hadn't found us." Thomas nodded. "I think about it too," he said. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had taken a different path that morning." Elena turned to him. "I'm glad you didn't," she said. Thomas looked at her. "I'm glad I did," he said. There was a long pause. Then Elena said, "You gave us a second chance." Thomas shook his head. "No," he said. "You gave me a second chance." Elena looked confused. Thomas smiled. "I was living in the past," he said. "I thought my life was over when my wife died. I stopped caring about anything, but meeting you and your kids, it reminded me that life doesn't end just because something bad happens. Sometimes it begins again." Elena reached out and touched his hand. "Thank you," she said. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "You're welcome." That night, as the stars came out, Elena and Thomas sat together in silence. Inside the house, Lily and Max played quietly. Outside, the world felt peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, both of them felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope, belonging, and love. Time passed quietly in Silver Hollow. The seasons turned. Summer faded into autumn, then into winter again. But this time, when the snow came back, it didn't bring fear. It brought peace. Elena Hartley stood at her kitchen window, watching Lily and Max play outside in the yard. They were building a snowman together, their cheeks red from the cold, their laughter rising like music into the sky. She smiled as she sipped her tea. Not long ago, that same snow had almost taken them away. Now, it was just part of life again, and they were living it, fully. A few months after the rescue, the town held a small ceremony at the community center. They wanted to honor Thomas Green. He hadn't asked for any attention, but people knew what he had done. He had saved a mother and her 2 children. He had gone against the cold and won. At first, Thomas didn't want to go. "I didn't do anything special," he told Elena one day. "You did everything special," she replied. "You saw us when no one else did. You helped us when we needed you most." So he went. The room was full of people, neighbors, doctors, teachers, even the mayor. When his name was called, everyone clapped. Thomas stood up slowly, looking around, at all the faces smiling at him. He felt shy, unsure of what to say. Then he looked at Elena and her kids sitting near the front. Lily waved at him. Max gave him a thumbs up. Thomas smiled. He took the microphone and said, "I don't know if I'm a hero. I just saw something that needed to be done, and I did it, that's all." People clapped again. Later, someone handed him a small plaque. "Thank you for your bravery," it read. Thomas kept it on his shelf at home next to an old photo of him and his late wife. He thought she would have liked Elena and the kids. She always loved helping people too. After the ceremony, Elena decided to do something bigger. She wanted to make sure other families wouldn't go through what she had. So, she started a small nonprofit called Snow Safe Families. The goal was simple: help families in rural areas prepare for winter emergencies. She worked with local stores to collect warm clothes, blankets, food kits, and emergency supplies. She also taught classes on how to stay safe during big storms. Her story was shared online. Soon, people from other towns and even other states began reaching out. Some sent donations, others asked to share her tips. One reporter wrote, "Elena Hartley could have let fear stop her. Instead, she used her pain to protect others." That made Elena cry. Not because she wanted praise, but because she realized how far she had come. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was helping others survive too. Thomas, meanwhile, found himself doing more than just cutting wood and checking traps. He became a part of Elena's family. On weekends, he would visit. Sometimes he'd take Lily and Max for short walks in the forest. Other times, he'd sit with Elena on the porch and talk about life. He taught Lily how to build a birdhouse. He showed Max how to track animal footprints in the snow. He even joined them for holidays. On Thanksgiving, he carved the turkey. On Christmas, he helped put up lights. On birthdays, he baked cookies and blew up balloons. Neighbors noticed. "He's like their uncle now," one said. Another added, "Or maybe more than that." And maybe they were right. Over time, Elena and Thomas grew closer. They didn't rush things. They both had pasts they needed to heal from, but they found comfort in each other. They found strength. They found love. Not in a dramatic way, but in quiet moments, sharing stories by the fire, holding hands while walking in the woods, or simply being there when the other needed support. One evening, as they sat on the porch again, Elena turned to Thomas. "Do you think life gives second chances?" she asked. Thomas looked at her. "I used to think it didn't," he said. "I thought once something was gone, it was gone forever." "And now?" she asked. He smiled. "Now I think sometimes life gives us another chance to start over, but only if we're brave enough to take it." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you found us," she whispered. Thomas gently placed his arm around her. "I'm glad I did too," he said. Years passed. Lily grew taller. Max learned to ride a bike. Elena kept running her nonprofit, which now helped dozens of families every winter. Thomas still lived in his cabin, but he spent most of his time with Elena and the kids. I never stopped being thankful for the day he saw a flash of red in the snow, because that day changed everything. He had gone out to check his traps. Instead, he found a new family. One winter morning, Elena sat at her desk, typing on her laptop. She had been working on something special, a book. It was based on her true story. The storm, the struggle, the snow, the rescue, she called it. The embrace that wasn't goodbye. Inside, she wrote about fear, about hope, about the moment she thought she was saying goodbye forever, and about the man who brought them back. When the book was finished, she sent it to a publisher. To her surprise, it became a bestseller. People loved it. It inspired many. One reader wrote, "Your story reminded me that kindness can change lives. Thank you for sharing it." Another said, "I cried, I laughed, and I believed in miracles again." Elena donated part of the profits to her nonprofit. She also traveled to schools and community centers to speak about winter safety and the power of kindness. She always ended her talks the same way. If you ever see someone in trouble, even if it's just a flash of red in the snow, don't walk away. Help them. You might just save a life. Back in Silver Hollow, life continued. The snow fell. The wind blew. But now it didn't feel so cold. Not anymore. In a small cabin not far from town, Thomas sat by the fire. He held a copy of Elena's book in his hand. He flipped through the pages. There was a chapter about him. He read it quietly. Then he closed the book and smiled. Outside, the world was white again. Inside, it was warm.